How many times are the Huskies going to be up by 40 plus points? We talk about all that and more right here on Locked On Huskies.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Huskies. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That gentleman over there is Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies to Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get 200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Now, Lars, I know we did it in the cold open, but Chuck Morrell just had the quote of the year so far to this point. He was asked on Monday during his press conference, how many true freshmen are going to burn their red shirt at this point? And he said, I don't know. How many times will we get by 40 points? I couldn't tell you. And the only one right now that's really on notice for that, I would say, is Devin Bryant, the linebacker. But do you think that there are going to be multiple freshmen at this point that do burn the red shirt? Because it does feel like there are going to be a couple on the offensive side at least.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the other thing to consider is, in the way these first four games have gone, does that continue? And also then which positions are guys where there's maybe less depth? Or also part of it is you could also just say, hey, we just want to see how they do. How are they progressing? It doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, because when this comes into play, it's like, okay, well, if you're burning their red shirt, they almost have to play every game of the season just to make it worth it, right? Or play,
right,
8 to 12, right? A majority of the games. You don't want to have a guy burn his red shirt, play 5 or 6 games, gets hurt or does whatever. It's like, wait, now we just wasted an entire year on his progress and eligibility. So I think there's a number of guys, Jacob Lane's been able to get into a few games. Leroy Bryant's got into a couple in a row at cornerback. I think there's a number of guys that could see their role increase as the season goes along, provided the team continues to blow opponents out. The problem is that's not at some point. There's going to be a week that says, okay, hey, we actually have to play into the fourth quarter. The starters have to play into the fourth quarter. Oregon, Oregon State, those sort of games towards the end of the right. Like if you're playing your third and fourth stringers and your walk-ons in the fourth quarter, it's either a blowout because you're getting blown out or,
because you're blowing somebody out.
Right. And more likely than not, it's going to be neither of those cases. And you're probably just going to have to play your starters for more of the second half.
Right. And I think that's why I wanted to make sure that we discuss this, because it kind of turns into the question of, okay, well then which one of these guys is going to make their way into the rotation, right? Because Devin Bryant doesn't look like he's quite there. But that's a position where there isn't necessarily a lot of depth there at the moment. So he's had to play in every game because it's not like you're going to leave Carson Bruner or Raylan Goforth out there, because Bruner's been really important on special teams and Goforth has had a role and he's looked really good so far. So you got to let Devin Bryant do it. You saw Braden Bruner get in there for a little bit. The walk-on got to play next to his brother, which was really cool. But then and then Jacob Lane was somebody that I really wanted to discuss, because he just looks really good. And that targeting penalty was a little bit unfortunate, which is kind of the way that that play happened and the way that the receiver was moving at the time. But he's somebody who every time he gets on the field, we saw this kind of, even at fall camp too, there were some days with, who's that? Oh, that's Jacob Lane. Wow, he looks really good. And that's somebody who I don't know if he'll work his way into the rotation necessarily, because we've seen Sakai Salafo look really good. Maurice Himes, Lance Holtzclaw, like there's still some depth there at the position. Voitanufi, obviously, don't want to leave him out. And so it's not like unless he finds a way to just say, yeah, you can't keep me off the field because I'm that good of a pass rusher right now, he probably won't work his way in there. But I've been really, really just intrigued with his progress.
No, I definitely agree. And he was kind of one of those intriguing takes because you can see the upside down the road 2, 3, 4 years, where it's like, okay, this is not necessarily a quote unquote project, but almost kind of in that similar Lance Holtzclaw, Maurice Himes role, where it's like, okay, for different reasons, we're not going to play you right away, but we do see what you can bring, given a year in the weight room, another year in the scheme, that sort of thing. And he's shown flashes early. I mean, I think he's definitely more of a speed rusher, I think, at this point. But
Absolutely,
the older he gets, if he puts on more weight, he could become that setting the edge rusher like Sakai is and things like that. But even from a special teams perspective, you also don't want to have all your freshmen out on special teams because, well,
that'll still burn their red shirt.
Right. So I think at some point you would see Darren Barkin, the other Drew Fowler,
Green should get a little
right
bit there. Yeah.
Right. A lot of those kind of second tier, third tier guys who are above the true freshmen but below the starters. So you've got enough combination of guys to be like, hey, we want you to be ready just in case, but like we really don't want to burn your red shirt if we have to.
Right. And it's just kind of switching focus to the offense. I feel like there are two guys that we're going to see burn their red shirt kind of no matter what at this point. And it has nothing to do with, or one of them might have a little bit to do with necessity, but even then, like before the season, we're talking about Landon Hatchett, the offensive lineman, and Tybo Rogers, the running back. And starting with Landon, yeah, there's a little bit of necessity now with the injury to Julius Buelow, who I don't expect him to play in the Arizona game. I think he'd be back for Oregon, though. But either way, it's not like Landon has been bad. He looks really, really good. And Ryan Grubb told us before or at the end of fall camp that he really does has earned his way into the rotation.
Yeah, and I think but it's not just at center too. I think that's what's been the surprise. I think we talked about this yesterday and the day before. It's not necessarily a surprise that Parker's been this good, but it's almost kind of like, okay, wow, because Parker has been so good, you can now try Landon at a number of different spots. We saw him at left guard against Michigan State. We've seen him we haven't really seen him at right guard, actually. I think is the one position we haven't seen him at. But that's because his older brother Guerin has been there. So it's like, okay, you're finding ways to use that combination differently, and you're never going to see Landon at tackle. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
But along the three interior positions, you're going to probably see him more likely than not, at least at two of them, center, backup center, and third team left guard.
Right.
But even that third team has kind of become second team with Julius now out and things like that. So I think, yeah, because I remember saying before the season, I don't think Landon will burn his red shirt because they shouldn't need to unless of injury. Now the injuries are kind of mounting up, so now this is where it's like, hey, Landon's giving us every reason to play him. There's no reason not to play him. He's not going to start, but at the same point, we don't need him to start. We just need him to kind of maintain that energy in the second half of games to where when we get a first half blowout, we can kind of maintain that with the second team unit in the late third quarter and into the fourth quarter.
Right. And it shows their confidence with him because if they weren't confident in him and they wanted to make sure that he would be saved, they would play Jalen Clement left guard, or they would play his brother who would snap the ball a bunch at center when Parker's not in there. There are ways to make it work, and they've said no. We're going to stick with Landon, and it's truly impressive just to see what he's done. And then in the backfield, Tybo Rogers, he's played in 2 games now. Correct me if I'm wrong there. I can't remember if I saw him out there during the Tulsa game. But either way, even if he's out there during the Tulsa game, that's 3, right? And he's just looked really, really impressive when he is out there. And during the live chat of this morning show, I was on there for a little while. I was doing our morning promos, and somebody asked me, who are the 5 fastest players on the team? I was like, I think Tybo has worked his way into this discussion. And I think that's just one element that he brings to the table is he has that game-changing speed, but he also just looks like a really complete back. He's really strong for his size. He catches the ball out of the backfield really well, and they seem to be okay with him in pass pro, or he wouldn't be out there.
Right. I mean, I think the latter is probably where he can improve the most. And, but again, it's not that he's been bad in pass protection. I just think he could, the bigger he gets, things like that he could become that Dylan Johnson, maybe not that big necessarily, but the point of, get more stout, easier to pick up pass protection and things like that. But yeah, I mean, he's done ever since fall camp when he got suspended. He's done basically everything the staff has asked him to do, and that's why he was able to get in against Michigan State, able to get in against Cal. There's certain things, and it's not just as a running back. I mean, he's actually been equally as good as a pass catcher. That's why I made the Dylan Johnson comparison, because he's not just that one-trick pony. He's able to actually do a number of things with his offense, so they want to see him in a game setting. What can you do? Can you actually focus when the lights are on? And he absolutely has.
No, I like that point a lot. And I think you could say that this coaching staff has done a really good job early of betting on true freshmen, wouldn't you say? Another place that is really fun for some betting, that'd be FanDuel Sportsbook, because you can snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. And, real quickly, Michael Penix is the Heisman favorite on FanDuel right now. So if you like what you've seen from him so far, might as well go ahead and throw some money on there right now before those odds just keep getting cut down, because right now he's plus 340, I think was the last I saw. So you can make a little bit of money by throwing some money on number 9. All right, Lars, this is a fun one. And, as we were talking about this before the show, I know we both kind of had the idea to just kind of have this go a whole bunch of different ways. And so the question is, what has stood out to you the most through 4 games? Is it a player? Is it one area of the game? Is it a position group? Please.
I mean, I think the easiest one is that this offense, and particularly Michael Penix, because we've talked about this numerous times, though.
Yes.
Where last season it was 300 yards, 300 plus, 300 plus, 300 plus, 300 plus, and which is good, right? You want a 300-yard day is good. But the way they were starting the season with 400 yards, 450 yards without even trying, and it's
effortless.
Even against Michigan State, right? Where it's like, okay, you forget the first 2 against Boise State and Tulsa, right? Just let's count Power 5 opponents here. Even against Cal and Michigan State, he's thrown for 7 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, and I want to say 1 interception. I think maybe
1 interception against Cal.
But even that, it's like, okay, whatever. Whatever. No one's perfect, but Michael Penix has been dang near almost perfect this year. I mean,
yes, he has.
Not even just from a decision-making perspective, but last year he was throwing guys open. Now he's throwing guys open for touchdowns without trying. Like the one to
like
Rome.
That throw to Rome, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one that I can't get over. It's like Rome's not even out of his break yet. That's not the route he's running. And yet Penix sees an open 10 yards of acreage in the far corner of the end. Like, I guess I'll just drop it in there. Opposite hash. Off play action, 40 yards in the air, 50 yards in the air, something like that.
40 something, yeah.
Yeah, some ridiculous number. But I mean, that's sort of the thing. It's like Penix is making the ridiculous throws look easy, and he's shown that improvement that NFL scouts wanted to see, where he can drive the ball down the field. He's doing it a second year. He is getting a little bit of pressure this year, but he's still handling it just as well. He's able to move around in the pocket, shift, and do things like that, to where he's not panicking. He's not like, oh, hey, see, when he doesn't have a perfect offensive line, that right. He struggles. It's like, no, you can even have a marginal offensive line that can't run the ball, and yet he'll still figure it out.
No, absolutely. And he's just done such a great job of that all year. And I did want to take a second to talk about him, because I went in a different direction with this, but Michael Penix has been the number 1 standout on this team. No question about it. And it's just really, it's kind of crazy to see just some people on social media who are just nitpicking, like, oh, look at this one bad throw that he made. Or look, it's like, did you watch literally anything else that he's done? Like, it's okay to say that you haven't. Just don't put these takes out there. It just, please. I insist it's like people who are saying, like, oh, the defense gave up 500 yards to Cal. It's okay to just say you didn't watch the game. That is fine. Like, that's all you're saying with this statement. And speaking of the defense, that's kind of where I wanted to go with this. I wanted to highlight the defense as a whole, because the offense, and specifically Michael Penix, are the number 1 standout on this team. But I think that the defense, and I really wanted to give some kudos to Jabbar Muhammad. As everybody on the show knows, that's one of my agendas for the year is Jabbar Muhammad has been a true number 1 shutdown corner. And this defense has been really, really impressive. And even though, you can point to all 4 of these teams having subpar offenses, it doesn't really matter, because last year it didn't necessarily look the same, especially in that first game against Kent State. It was, I see some chinks in the armor here. I see some issues there that need to be worked out. And throughout the course of the season, those issues were just exposed more often than not. Like even against Michigan State, who their offense wasn't that great last year either. But there were still areas of the areas that were exploited, I would say. This year, that didn't happen. This year against Cal, that didn't happen. I don't care what the box score says. We watched the game. We know what happened. So I think that the defense really does deserve a lot of credit. And the reason I wanted to make sure I highlighted the defense in this discussion was because going forward, these tests aren't going to be nearly as easy. And I feel way more comfortable saying this defense can hold their own than I did last season.
Yeah, or even coming into the season. I think, which is kind of ironic because we haven't seen the pass rush. We have seen the pass rush, right? But in terms of the traditional numbers that you would expect and things like that, Braylon still doesn't have a sack and things like that, but they have as many turnovers as they had all of last season. So I think where the defense has made the strides is where it matters, forcing those turnovers. Okay, if you can't get a sack, force a turnover, force a throwaway, force a punt, that sort of thing, to where you're getting the offense the ball back with a short field. And then we saw what happened like against Michigan State, to where Meach gets the interception. 3 plays later, Washington scores. That's how the offense is able to extend the leads, build those 21-point leads, those 28-point leads, to where then the defense can sit back, pin their ears back, and just go after the quarterback, and you're not necessarily as worried. But it's almost kind of like they're feeding off of each other, right? That's what makes it. And that's why we both believe this is the top 4 team in the country, because both units, like, yes, the offense is better than the defense, fine,
for sure.
It's not as much as it was last. But it's not as much as it was last year. It's kind of like, okay, we're gonna feed off you. It's almost like an alley-oop, right? You're feeding the other is feeding off the other. It's like it's not that one can't shoot or one can't dunk and jump. It's just we're playing the role. It's
that's what it is. It's just it all feeds off each other. No, I like that, because that's what I wanted to say. Right. First of all, it's hard to be better than the number 1 overall offense. That's very hard to do. But this was a point that I know I made on Inside the Huskies over the summer a decent amount, where it was this defense just needs to improve by 20 yards per game. And right now, after the Cal game, with all the yards that were allowed in the fourth quarter, it's not there yet. But if you take out those garbage time yards, this defense has improved by more than that. And that's really all that needed to happen. Because the point I made was this doesn't need to be a top 20, top 25 super elite defense for this to work. They just need to be top 40. They need to be serviceable. They need to be fine. They need to be trustworthy. And they've shown that they can be better than trustworthy, that they can make a play when needed, which is not something that you could say last year, especially in the secondary. You could kind of say it about the pass rush last year, but you definitely couldn't say it about the secondary.
Yeah, I think that, if we're going back to the original question of what stood out, not even just on defense, but the secondary, I think that has really been where the biggest growth in this team has been. I think that's a fair assessment, right?
Oh, it absolutely is, yeah.
Because, you're talking about Vince Nunley, you're talking about Cam Fabicula, and 2 guys who, yes, the staff was high on, but we both were like, okay, well, we haven't seen it, and we're seeing other guys in practice get that opportunity and things like that. But when the lights have shined this year, both of those guys have stepped up. Nunley was more injury. Cam was more, okay, does he have a position? Like, where's he best suited? And I think Cam basically just said, you know what? Everybody forgot about me. Okay, cool. I'll just show everybody. And he's literally done that. Tackling, run defense, pass defense. He basically took away the experience and seniority of Asa Turner and didn't miss a beat. Now, again, yes, it was against Cal, so can you replicate that against the Oregon, USC, Utah, things like that? That's where it'll really come in to be a real test. But 4 games in,
it still matters.
They've all passed, yeah.
Right. Because you can still look at the film even after the 4 wins from last year and just say, there were questions. Are there still some questions about this team? Sure, absolutely. But are they nearly as glaring as they were last year? Not even close. I think that's the biggest difference, because I always have to reference to some of the things that you see on social media where people are just like, oh, look at this. Oh, Washington, we need to talk more about this with Washington. No, you really don't, because we in the media sat here and had this conversation last year, not on this podcast, but you and I have had these conversations numerous times where it's, okay, well, how are they going to do this going forward? How are they going to do that for the rest of the season? And those weaknesses got exposed. We saw that against Arizona State. We saw that against UCLA. And there's still tests. This weekend against Arizona is going to be a big test of that. But it's not nearly as glaring, in my opinion.
Well, not only is it not as glaring, but I think this team, it's one of those cliches where it's like, oh, hey, this team is just focused. This team is determined. It's like, but they really are. Turn on the tape. Jalen Polk, catches.
Catching literally everything thrown within a 3-mile radius of him.
Right. Even when Penix throws the ball high, it doesn't even make a difference anymore. And it's like, okay, so the question for the offense is, can you get 150 yards combined between 3 running backs? They've shown they can. So It's like, okay, the only question we had was, can you somewhat balance this offense? Yeah, you can. All 4 tight ends caught a pass. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, it's just incredible to where, this team is just a matter of, okay, who is going to give them the biggest punch, and can they handle Washington's counterpunch?
Right, and
that's the only 2 questions.
I like your point, but I kind of want to take it the other way, and it's how are teams going to counter Washington's punch? Because it's kind of like an old Mike Tyson, just an early reverse, where it's going to put you down, and can you get back up? That's kind of what this offense feels like at this point, when they can put up 24 points in the first quarter. They can put up 45 points in the half. And I said this on Locked On Pac-12 earlier this week, and Spencer McLaughlin, shout out to him, he did not believe me. I said, we have come away from every game feeling like they could have scored 20 more points if they really wanted to. And that's where I'm at with this team at this point. There's so much, there's still more to be desired. And I think that they haven't turned it up to 11 yet because they haven't played that top tier competition just yet.
I mean, the offense hasn't even turned it up to 8 yet, apparently.
Shout out to Ryan Grubb.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, so I think we're still waiting for that complete performance. We almost saw it against Cal, but the second half ruined that. Same thing with Michigan State, where you only put up 6 points in the second half. When you're in a game in the second half, we're waiting for that Mike McDaniel 70-20 Denver Broncos Miami Dolphins game. We're just, please, for the love of God, just finish them in the second half.
Right. And
that's going to come in Oregon. That's going to come against Oregon. I guarantee it.
I was going to make a comment about that. Just, remember what the score was a couple of years ago? 70-21. Oh, pretty similar. But kind of going off of that, and we got to switch gears here a little bit. And because I think this is a really fun conversation that we were having some fun with before the show started. Just you proposed the question, all right, who should return punts? Should it be J-Mac or Rome? And I kind of threw a third name into the mix, which we'll get to, because it should be between these 2 guys, right? We've seen what they can do. So we haven't really planned this part out. I think it'd be just more fun to do it live. Okay, plant your flag, and Jalen McMillan or Rome Odunze. Who would you choose to return punts?
Don't get mad at me, J-Mac, but I think Rome would be the guy for me. Not just because of the punt return, but I think not the punt return for touchdown against Cal, but I think there's just a different level of vision. Like I think in a weird way, Jalen McMillan is more confident. Rome Odunze is more convicted. There's a difference.
Rome's also a little bit faster, in my opinion.
And I think that the combination of conviction, when he hits the hole with conviction, and the vision that he has, it's not that Jalen doesn't have that vision, right? Because I think Jalen McMillan does have that vision. But I just think Rome, it's kind of that 1A, 1B. I think there's just enough of a gap to where, unless Rome is catching, fair catching it every time, which I don't think he will.
No.
But, it's like one of those, okay, until proven otherwise, just let Rome cook and see what happens.
No, I like that a lot, because you're right. The vision is the number one thing. And I will take the other side here just to talk about Jalen McMillan. And I think that he does really good things with the ball in his hands. And I think that he's a little bit shiftier in some of these short areas because he's just not as big as Rome is. And I think that there's something to be said for that, because Rome is super powerful. We watched him break tackles left and right against Cal. But I think there's just something to be said for what Jalen provides back there. But that also just kind of leads me into the other person that I wanted to talk about in the segment, and that's Jeremy Bernard. Because we've seen what Jeremy can do with the ball in his hands when he's returning kicks. And the thing kind of is, okay, if you really, like we saw it with Trent McDuffie in 2021, right? Where he was returning punts to start the year, rolls his ankle, and then we didn't see him out there for the rest of the season. And the question is kind of, all right, and obviously we don't hope that any of this happens, but that is something that just happens in the game of football, right? Where these minor things will kind of pile up over the course of the season. And Jeremy Bernard is super talented, but there really just isn't as much of a spot for him in the passing game right now. And yes, he's found he has a role and he's in the offense and he's getting touches every game, but the coaching staff clearly wants to get him more touches. So why not do that just in the return game?
And to that point, it could be a case of where Rome starts the game as your punt returner, but you kind of maybe switch off every 2 punts. One, Rome does 2, Bernard does 1, or Bernard does 2, Rome does 1. That sort of thing. It's where you're balancing it in the second half and keeping both guys honest, because I think you do want Rome to show his NFL potential for teams in multiple ways, right? I think there's an element to be said there. But you also don't want to get him hurt. So Bernard going back there, kind of being that same game-breaking kind of guy. They're both being from the Vegas area. I don't think it's the worst duo to have 2 guys from the desert go out and torch special teams.
Are you looking for like a Heat connection there? I like where you're going.
That's kind of where I was going. I just didn't want to, because it's not Arizona desert, but it is Vegas desert. And I mean, if you want to push all the chips in the middle of the table on both the Vegas sides,
okay, all right.
Couldn't help myself.
I respect what you're doing here. And
couldn't help myself.
So there are a couple other names that I wanted to throw in this discussion because I feel like we do have a very clear-cut group of guys that can do that. But there are a couple other ones that I think would be really interesting to watch in the kick return game, or punt return, excuse me. And one of them is somebody who's listed as a starting kick returner. We just haven't really seen a whole ton of him. That's Daniel Ngata. I thought that would be just a really interesting name to bring up in this discussion because he just hasn't gotten a lot of touches so far. And you made a point before the show about him just probably doing some sitting and waiting and kind of treating this almost as a redshirt year where he's still going to get touches, he's still going to play, but he's going to be a much bigger part of the offense next year. And I think that just kind of with how shifty he proved he can be, and for a guy who's not the biggest, he's really, really powerful. And he's really quick when he does get out into the open field. And he just feels like somebody who can kind of be like, and I hate to just kind of use this short king comparison, I'll say, but kind of like a Deuce Vaughn almost kind of guy, where he's not Deuce Vaughn. He's not. But he can just kind of affect the game in a similar way.
See, it's funny how you say that because I was thinking Will Nixon for those same exact reasons.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
Because we've seen him. Obviously, he's not going to be your main bell cow, but it's almost like because Will has gotten more touches than Ngata this season, I think to your point, Daniel would be the one that would do the return game. But if you want to bring Daniel back into the offense and put Will on special teams, it's just a matter of which one fits better where. Because we've seen Will, he's been about 2 missed tackles and 1 cut away from 3 touchdowns this season.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. He's been right there. And so I think that's kind of the guy you want as your punt returner or kick returner, to where when that hole is open up and when those blocks set up, he's got to hit the hole right when you see it. And that's kind of been the struggles for Washington teams in the past is, okay, the holes are developing, but it's almost like stutter, step, and go. It's like, no. Right. We need you to hit the hole with conviction. That's why Rome's back there doing punt returns, because he's got that conviction. I think Will Nixon
goes.
Yeah, but I think Will Nixon's kind of in that same boat to where, and not that Daniel Ngata couldn't be, but I just think we've seen it more from Will this season than we have from Daniel.
No, I like that a lot. And Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here on Locked On Huskies. And thank you to all the everydayers out there for listening. We really do appreciate your support every day. We try to jump into the live chat during the premieres in the morning every now and again to answer questions. So if you don't watch it at first, that's fine. You can always leave comments below. We do try to get to as many of those as we possibly can. But if this is your first time watching, we hope you enjoyed the show. We hope that you come back, and the best way to do that is by smashing that subscribe button. And you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're everywhere. Please feel free to like, comment, leave us a 5-star review, show your support. We try to get to, as I said, as many of these as we possibly can. And stay tuned. We're going to be talking about Arizona on Friday. Stick around for that. We'll see you then.